What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. In an unexpected and historic development, Ukraine has made the bold decision to invade Russian territory. On August 6th, when it all started, in a move that defied expectations and shook the geopolitical landscape, Ukrainian forces struck deep into Russia. Two things made this incursion even crazier than it already seems. First, it became the first invasion of a Russian territory by a foreign country's army. And second, it was the unprecedented move when a non-nuclear and much smaller country took territory of a nuclear state. This significant moment represents not just a shift in tactics, but a new stage in a war that has already lasted far longer than anyone anticipated. As Ukraine pushes its forces into Russian territory, questions are multiplying. What are Ukraine's ultimate objectives? How far will they go? How Russian secret services missed such a massive scale operation literally next to its borders? And how might the broader international community, particularly the United States and NATO, react to this daring escalation? Let's begin by answering these questions one by one. Ukraine's decision to invade Russia has opened a new chapter in the war. This invasion is more than a tactical skirmish, it is a full-scale military operation involving some of Ukraine's most elite and highly trained forces. The 22nd Mechanized Brigade and the 82nd Air Assault Brigade, both equipped with modern Western technology and extensively trained in NATO tactics. They form the spearhead of this bold move. These brigades have spent much of the war in reserve, biding their time while Ukraine engaged in defensive operations. But now, they have been unleashed a coordinated assault aimed at seizing control of Russian territory. What makes these actions so remarkable is the range of advanced Western equipment being utilized. We're not just talking about tanks and artillery, no. We are witnessing a comprehensive use of drones, helicopters, air defense systems, and sophisticated electronic warfare equipment. These resources, provided at some extent by the US and its European allies, have been crucial to Ukraine's ability to mount such a far-reaching offensive. Up until this point, Western nations had exercised extreme caution, limiting their support to defensive operations within Ukrainian borders. The use of these tools in a direct invasion of Russia crosses a threshold that few expected. For Ukraine, this moment represents more than a territorial gain. It is a statement of intent. By bringing the fight into Russian territory, Kiev is signaling to Moscow, and obviously the rest of the world, that it will not be limited to defending its own borders. The question now is whether Ukraine's gamble will pay off and how far are they planning to go. To answer the first of these two questions, the Ukrainian gamble already, in my personal opinion, paid off in full. There is no argument about this one. They were able to breach Russian border, bring heavy military equipment and thousands of soldiers, and do this right literally in front of Russian military's eyes. Besides this, they were able to hold the ground they captured, dig in, and even expand the territories even further. But unfortunately, the element of surprise is no longer here. Not just Russia, but the rest of the world already knows about this successful incursion. The Russian army knows exactly where Ukrainians are and control all the potential roads for further advancements. So it will be extremely difficult for Ukraine to make massive gains at once moving forward. That's quite unfortunate, but that's the reality. So, unless some extraordinary events happen, it is very unlikely that Ukraine will be able to capture major cities of the region such as Kursk itself. And you guys, you already know which side of the conflict I support. Once again, I'm just being realistic here. But it does not mean that this incursion was for nothing. As we talked about it in our previous videos, the biggest achievement of Ukraine is that they were able to completely shatter the image of invincible Putin. He is not almighty. He is not going to use nuclear weapons. He is just a master of blackmail and threats. And no more than that. While it was pretty scary to poke the Russian bear at first, the events in Kursk showed that there is nothing to be afraid of, both for Ukrainians and for the West. And if there will be a moment of Putin's weakness, Ukraine should take it. And not just Ukraine, but people of Russia as well. Because that's another thing. Regular Russians also saw how indifferent was the Russian government towards the struggles of Kursk residents. Putin literally left them alone. He could not protect them. He did not even pay attention to the unfolding events. Just imagine, you had to abandon your life, escape Kursk region, not knowing when and if you'll ever return. And the main federal channels show entertaining programs on TV, and the news about how good life in Russia in general is. Even the biggest Putin supporters turned away from him in a matter of days, if not hours. So that's a very dangerous path Putin has chosen to fall on, ignoring the problems of his own people, hoping they're going to resolve themselves without his involvement. He thought his people will just forget the events, just like they forgot all the previous hardships. But one thing is not being politically involved because of things that are not directly involving you, which another thing is that it is impossible to stay indifferent when your life changed completely in a couple of days. You just can't stay passive here. And what happens if Ukraine miraculously continues its march across Russia and reaches major cities? Russian propaganda can ignore protests in small villages with the population of 5,000 people or less, like Sudzha or Glushkova. But what if Ukrainians reach other, much bigger cities, like Kursk itself or Rostov, which is in completely different direction? Protests in these cities will no longer be ignored. If the state media will close their eyes, the regular people will share the photos and videos of these events on Twitter or X, Telegram, Instagram, literally everywhere. And the amount of information will be so great that it simply won't be ignored. Silence from Putin's administration will only exaggerate the matter. So, as you can see, the incursion of Ukrainians into Kursk region, while not extremely significant in terms of territorial control, it is absolutely massive in psychological warfare. So the next question is the following. How did the Russian military even miss this massive scale operation, which was once again being prepared right next to their borders in the first place? One of the most surprising aspects of Ukraine's invasion is how poorly Russia was prepared for such bold maneuver. Despite the extensive intelligence apparatus at Russia's disposal, ranging from satellites to surveillance drones to say the least, it appears that Moscow was caught with their pants down, quite literally. Historical parallels bring us back to the Second World War for a striking comparison between Russian forces and Germany and the Nazistic one. During the Allied invasion of Normandy in 1944, German forces failed to respond in a timely manner due to the breakdown in communication, partially because key officials were asleep or unavailable. In the very same way, modern Russian forces seem to have been blindsided by Ukraine's invasion, despite early warning signs. Russian intelligence detected unusual troop movements in the weeks leading to the offensive, but these reports were apparently dismissed by the chief of the General Staff of Russian Forces, Valery Gerasimov. Perhaps Gerasimov and others in Moscow believed that Ukraine was too stretched to mount such an ambitious attack on Russian soil. But this underestimation has now cost them dearly. Russia's military strategy in recent years has been heavily focused on Ukraine, with much of its advanced weaponry and personnel tied up along the Ukrainian front lines. This has left vast gaping holes of Russian territory, including border areas like Kursk, poorly defended and ill-equipped to withstand an incursion of this magnitude. The forces stationed along the border were primarily comprised of reservists, border patrol troops, sometimes even conscripts and lightly armed units, no match for the mechanized brigades Ukraine has deployed. As a result, Ukrainian forces have advanced rapidly, capturing significant territory within the first days of the invasion. The consequences of this lack of preparedness are extraordinary. Russia now faces the logistical nightmare of repositioning its forces from Ukraine if they want to continue defending its own borders. This will not be an easy task. The Ukrainian front is more than 200 miles away, and moving large amounts of heavy equipment across such distance takes time and obviously resources. To make matters worse, Ukrainian artillery bolstered with advanced systems like HIMARS is capable of striking Russian convoys long before they reach the front lines, as we already witnessed in the early days of Russian attempts to relocate its military equipment. This is exactly what happened, and you can already see these images right in front of your eyes. This is a classic case of strategic overreach, where Russia's heavy commitment in Ukraine has left its own homeland vulnerable. Another interesting question is, how far will the Western support go? One of the most intriguing aspects of this incursion is the role of the United States and its NATO allies. The war in Ukraine has always been a balancing act for the West, providing just enough military aid to keep Ukraine in the fight, while avoiding actions that could provoke a direct conflict with Russia. Up until now, this balance has been maintained by keeping Western-supplied equipment within Ukrainian borders. But with this incursion, the situation has changed dramatically. The Biden administration has denied any prior knowledge of Ukraine's plan to invade Russian territory, yet it is difficult to believe that Kiev would act without at least accidentally dropping some hints behind closed-door meetings. After all, the Ukrainian forces leading this invasion are equipped with the US-supplied weapons, including advanced artillery and air defense systems. The use of these tools in an invasion of Russia, as opposed to defending operations within Ukraine, represents a significant shift in the West's involvement in the conflict. This shift has sparked a renewed debate within the corridors of power in Washington. Throughout the war, two main camps have emerged within the Biden administration. On one side, Secretary of State Antony Blinken has advocated for a more aggressive approach, pushing for greater support to Ukraine and a more confrontational stance towards Russia. On the other side is National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, who has consistently urged caution, warning against actions that could lead to a wider war or a direct confrontation with Moscow. Now, with Biden's announcement that he will not run for the re-election in 2024, this internal debate has taken on new urgency. Ukraine is acutely aware that its most reliable ally in the White House may soon be gone. While Blinken has championed Ukraine's cause, the political landscape in the US could change dramatically if Biden is succeeded by a less supportive administration. Donald Trump, for example, the leading Republican candidate, has repeatedly stated that he would seek a quick end to the war, potentially by cutting off aid to Ukraine and conceding territory to Russia. Even if Vice President Kamala Harris succeeds Biden, and she is already obviously nominated by the Democrats, it is unclear whether she would continue the same level of support for Ukraine, especially as the war becomes less popular among American voters. For Ukraine, this uncertainty could explain the timing of this invasion. With the clock ticking on Biden's presidency, Kiev may feel that it is running out of time to make significant gains. By opening a new front in Russia itself, Ukraine is not only sending a message to Moscow, but also to Washington, demonstrating that it is willing to take risks to achieve its objectives while it still enjoys robust US support. For Russia, the invasion of its own territory represents a grave humiliation, specifically for Putin. For years, President Vladimir Putin has portrayed himself as a strong man, defending Russia from foreign aggression. Even the main goal of this so-called special military operation, according to Putin, is to prevent the expansion of NATO. Well, he failed this one. And to protect Russian speakers on Ukrainian territories. Well, not even being able to protect his own territories, he failed here as well. The psychological impact on both Putin's domestic standing and Russia's military command structure cannot be overstated. The invasion has exposed the weaknesses in Russia's military preparations and could lead to a loss of confidence in Putin's leadership, both among the Russian elite and the general population. In response, Russia has launched airstrikes and missile attacks targeting Ukrainian positions in an attempt to slow down their advancement in the Kursk region. However, these efforts have been only partially successful. Ukraine's use of mobile artillery and advanced air defense systems has allowed them to maintain their positions despite these counterattacks. Desperation has led the Russian military to call in reinforcements from unexpected sources, including former Wagner Group personnel and even units stationed in very distant conflict zones like the one in Mali. These emergency measures highlight the extent to which Russia is struggling to respond effectively to the Ukrainian incursion. The broader implications of this invasion extend far beyond the immediate battlefield. With Ukraine now able to strike deep into Russian territory, the war has entered a new and more dangerous phase. How far will Ukraine push its advantage? Could this lead to an even more aggressive response from Russia? The answers to these questions, for now, are unclear. We will continue to closely monitor the situation as events unfold. For the international community, this new front could have lasting consequences. NATO members, particularly those in Eastern Europe, will be watching closely to see how Russia responds to the invasion of its own territory. Meanwhile, China and other global powers are likely recalculating their positions, particularly towards Russia, considering how this shift might impact the broader balance of power. For now, Ukraine has managed to gain the upper hand in this new front, but the road ahead is fraught with uncertainties. Well, there you have it, guys. As always, thank you so much for watching. Please like this video, subscribe to my channel if you enjoyed today's episode. If you wish to support my work, there are links down below: PayPal donations, Patreon subscription for bonus content. You can also buy the Russian Dude merch. These links are down below. Thanks so much for watching. See you tomorrow. We won't succumb to their tricks, the facade they try to sell. Their twisted words and feeble claims on us all they cannot quell. We see through their lies, their feeble attempts to sway. We do not believe